أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
السلام عليكم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله والملائكة يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أصحاب سيدنا محمد، والحمد لله رب العالمين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسبحان الله العلي العظيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله خاتم الأنبياء والرسل أجمعين، المرسل رحمة للعالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى محمد قدوة العالمين، وعلى آله الأطهار الميامين، وعلى أصحابه المختارين، وعلى من اتبعوا بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، نؤمن به ونستعينه ونستجيره ونستهديه ونستنصره، فإنه حق من هدى الله فلا مضل له، ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. اللهم اصلح لنا ديننا الذي هو عصمة أمرنا، واصلح لنا دنيانا التي فيها معاشنا، واصلح لنا آخرتنا التي فيها معادنا، واجعل الحياة زيادة لنا في كل خير، واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر يا رب العالمين. A reflective human being, a Quranic human being, a human being that handles life on earth as Allah repeatedly reminds us to, time and time again. And Allah asks us to engage in ta'aqqul and tafakkur and tadhakkur. in essence, it is a constant reminder of the reflective life, that you are not simply like so much that is led by instinct, and so much that is engineered by habit. You are not simply a phenomena, as if something that manifests on this earth to enjoy a burst of energy, a momentary burst of energy that eventually extinguishes itself. Because the nature of everything that we are aware of on this earth is that it is born with a reservoir of energy, and then eventually the energy dissipates or transforms or is processed in one form or another. And that phenomena, that earthly phenomena, disappears the way it has appeared, with very little comprehension of why it came, why it existed, and ultimately where it went. A reflective life, a life of tafakkur and ta'aqqul and tadakkur, as the Quran repeatedly calls it, is premised on the idea that you, as a human being, and everything around you matters. That there are no simple, instant coincidences. That if you exist, you are anchored in a purpose in existence. And that everything that exists at the same time that you exist has a purpose, because this universe has a Lord, has an owner, has an intelligent designer that says this will be for the moment it is, and this will not be. SubhanAllah, what a reflective life means is taking yourself with the kind of seriousness that doesn't allow yourself, doesn't give yourself the excuse to let things slip by, or the excuse to think maybe there is no point and time is just a vacuum that we process. A reflective life is anchored in meaning. The time that I have because I meant to have it. And the time that I spend because I'm meant to spend it. And that ultimately there will be accounts to settle. And everything will be, or ultimately we will have to answer to the reflective choices that we engaged in our lifetime. Recently, Yet again in life, I observed a dog one of Allah's beautiful creations and creatures, who lived with this family for many years. Eventually, in recent days, this dog took its last breath and passed away. I've seen this dog from the time it was a young puppy, full of energy, full of action, activities, instincts, to the ultimate withering away of this energy and the dwindling away of power and the slow and painful surrender to death. A human being might be tempted to understand the life of this dog only through the perspective of how this dog impacted you as an individual. And this is precisely what human beings do. That you think of the life of this dog and you think, well, this dog accompanied me in this stage of life. This dog perhaps played with my children. This dog did whatever with my family. This dog ultimately lived a life and then reached the end where it leaves my family. But everything that you understand about the existence of this dog goes through the prism of my experience as a human being. If you do so, then you entirely miss the point of a universe that is owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A reflective person would see the life of this dog as it would see the life of everything that surrounds us, as an independent, autonomous entitlement. The existence of this dog, the life of this dog, was not about me and my family, but it was about its divine right to exist and its divine right to expend the time that it expended on earth. And my interaction with it must come from that perspective. So here's how it makes a great deal of difference. This poor dog, after 17 years, slowly died of cancer. It would have been the normal, selfish, egregious human thing to say that the life of this dog has become a major inconvenience upon me and my family. This dog now requires a great deal of attention and care. And it interferes and disrupts with my life routine. and with my ability to move, to travel, to work, to sleep, a true Muslim, a Muslim who understands what Islam is about and what life and existence is about, does not consider that choice. A true Muslim looks at the life of any creature, like this dog. The dog's name was Baby. And realizes that it is entitled to exist and entitled to demand your attention and your care, because it is Allah's will to put this dog in your path, for this dog to demand its rights from you, which you are obliged to grant because you believe this world has a Lord and Master. There's another old dog that we have right now who's going through the final stages of life. This dog, when it wakes up, immediately starts crying. And it starts crying because it's unable to get up, unable to walk. It needs assistance so that it can rise on its feet, drink water, consume food, go to the bathroom. The problem, though, is that once it does this and lies down again, 5 or 10 minutes later, it again starts crying. And it starts crying because it again needs assistance to rise to its feet. It is an exhausting process that my wife has been engaging in taking care of this dog. At the time, literally every 5 minutes, the dog needs assistance to be able to manage its affairs in life. It is easy for a person who does not understand the nature of entitlements in existence, the nature of the divine will, to come to the conclusion this dog has become a major burden. And perhaps, as they put it around here, it's time to put it to sleep, in quotes, which basically kill it. A Muslim understands that you've been placed in this position to render a service for something that is far beyond you, that this dog is entitled to life and mercy every bit as you are, and the choice of life and death in order to bolster your own convenience is simply not yours. The world is very different. When we come with the assumption that it has an owner and that everything is purposeful, that every tree, every plant, every bird, every animal is purposeful, and that you are purposeful in relation to the purposefulness of everything else. That there are no happenstance, there are no coincidences, there is no simply sacrificing the well-being of one for the sake of another. unless the authorization to do so comes from the master of this world. In other words, the only one who can authorize this ultimate process of giving one life more value than the other belongs only with the Lord and no human being. You might be tempted to say, of all the things that you chose to speak about, you chose to speak about dogs. Yeah. And the irony is that what made me decide to speak about dogs and how a purposeful life is bound to honor the life of even a very sickly dog to the very last minute of life is the extremely painful and sad affairs of Muslims. On the one hand, a student of the Quran understands how sacrosanct life is in all of its manifestations, in all its particles and pieces. But you look at the life of the Ummah, you look at the life of the Muslim nation, and a deep sense of longing for the truth and purity of Islam strikes you. Let me tell you a story. Biden, President of the United States, we all followed the big PR campaign about Biden's visit to the Middle East. And it was pumped up, billed, of course, as a trip of peace, peacemaking, promoting the interests of the people of the region, etc., etc., etc. And the truth of the matter is that it was a thoroughly racist journey. Biden expressed intense interest in the lives of one people and one people only, and that's the people of Israel. Israel, Biden called a dear friend, said you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. We are committed to the welfare and best interests of Israel. Long live Israel to the end. And when it came to all the Muslim countries in the region, Biden didn't speak about human rights, the value of life, didn't speak about the well-being of the people, didn't even acknowledge that there are people in these regions. Biden only spoke about the dictators who rule over the countries in this region. While Israel, Biden spoke about the Israelis as friends. With Saudi Arabia was summed up in the person of the king and his deputy. Egypt was summed up in the person of the fascist dictator Sisi and his government. Emirat was summed up in the person of the royal family that rules over the Emirat. Same thing with Bahrain, etc., etc. As a people, Muslims do not exist because we consistently perpetuate the racist paradigm that there are human beings that truly matter, like the Israelis, and then human beings who are specters and shadows, and we hardly acknowledge their existence. There was an event that, of course, in our beleaguered Muslim world, passed without notice. A painful event. As Biden visited the region, MBS got the point that Biden is not interested in the human rights of the Muslim people. Biden has no intention to champion the human rights of the Saudi people. And that Biden is only interested in the human rights of the Israeli people. The dictators of the region got the point. MBS got the point, MBZ got the point, Sisi got the point. In the midst of all of this, there is a Muslim sheikh, a Muslim scholar. His name is Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid. Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid, if you Google him and you look at his picture, you see an elderly man, looks kindly. And in fact, his claim to fame was that he was among the first to use the net to try to respond to Islamophobia. So in 1997, he created the website Question and Answer about Islam. He created something called the Zad Academy, designed or intended to respond to Islamophobia to the best of his ability and the ability of his supporters. Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid is known for his I would describe them as, like a lot of Saudi scholars, goes out of his way to avoid political issues. Tends to be jurisprudentially clearly Hanbali, but tends to be on the moderate side, on the of preaches coexistence, mutual understanding, etc., etc. But in 2017, Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid, like so many other Muslim Saudi scholars, was arrested and disappeared in prison. No one knows what precisely Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid has done wrong. The Saudi government at one point said that he was covering up for members of the Muslim Brotherhood, that he, although not a member of the Muslim Brotherhood himself, that he was sympathetic towards members of the Muslim Brotherhood. The charges, as usual, very flimsy evidence in very unfair trials. As Biden's trip approached, a Saudi court surprised all of us by acknowledging that there is no evidence against Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid and ordered his release. He was transferred from prison to a holding area as his papers would be finished. So to finish his papers, to process his papers, so he will be released. As he was waiting in the processing detention area of the prison, an order came from the High Court in Saudi Arabia ordering the rearrest of Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid and retrying him de novo. The court didn't cite why a new trial was necessary, didn't talk about new evidence, didn't talk about procedural mistakes or anything at all. A simple two-liner: rearrest and retry. I wish the story ended at that. This kind, elderly gentleman, after receiving this order and being retransferred back to prison, is physically assaulted by Saudi soldiers so brutally that they cracked his skull. Was beaten so severely that as Biden was saying his farewells and celebrating the new Abrahamic Accords and the new phase of peaceful coexistence with the only people he cares about, the Israelis, Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid passed away. Another Muslim scholar killed in prison, tortured to death, no investigations, no questions, no protests. The American government, of course, had no comment. Most human rights organizations were not interested. Nothing, absolute DEFCON silence. A man who used to have millions of followers, used to appear on television all over the Middle East, was praised as a learned scholar. Whether you agree with him or not, that's not the point, on various issues. A professor of Sharia, not even the attention and care and love that my two dogs receive from us here. His family was promptly ordered to shut up, take his body, bury it. No investigation, no questions. The Israelis, of course, are celebrating the Saudis. That's the Saudis that they love. That's the type of dictatorship that they love for Muslims. The Americans are not interested in the human rights of Muslims. And as a Muslim, I must reflect. That's what Allah has ordered me to do, to lead a reflective life. If my dog baby had an absolute right to exist, and an absolute, unconditional, unwavering right for care until Allah decides to take the soul of that dog. And if as a Muslim I was obliged to provide the care for these dogs, because I am anchored in purpose and meaning, because there are no coincidences, because there is no cheap life, because there is no accidental life, because everything must fulfill its purpose and meaning. If my soul and heart called upon me to memorialize and honor the lives of dogs in a Muslim household, what has happened? What has happened to my people, my ummah, my fellow Muslims, where not only scholars like Saeed al-Ghamdi or Salman al-Oda or Awad al-Qarni or Sifr al-Hawali continue to waste away in prison, but for my ummah, even someone like Muhammad Salih al-Munajjid can be tortured to death, and not one khutbah, not one imam, not one mosque, all the people. There is another story, I won't tell you, won't go into all the details, but there's another scholar, or journalist actually, his name is Dawish. Dawish's son thought, well, Biden is coming to visit Saudi Arabia, and my father has been rotting in prison for many years. In fact, the Saudi government refuses to confirm that they have my father in custody. His father is called Malik Dawish. The Saudi government says that Malik Dawish is in Syria, but I have his passport. I know he didn't go to Syria. I know he disappeared when Saudi security forces came at night and took him from his bed. So Dawish's son thought, well, maybe Biden can help. Maybe these humanitarian Westerners who care about human rights and human values. So Dawish's son gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal 2 days before Biden arrived. And in it, he talked about the plight of his family and the agony and pain of having their father disappear now for many years, and how all the different stories that reach them about the way that he's been tortured and mistreated, etc., etc. For giving this interview with the Wall Street Journal, promptly after Biden left, Dawish's son was arrested, and he himself now is disappeared. Our government's response? Complete lack of interest. Complete disinterest. The Abraham Accords that our government keeps touting and celebrating is about Muslims accommodating the life and promoting the life of those who the West considers worthy of life. But apparently, Muslims themselves are not a part of this equation. They are not. part of what is worthy of life in this paradigm. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم وأسأل الله يستجب لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وعلى من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Yeah, yet again, another Muslim scholar tortured to death, complete obliviousness, complete lack of interest. The sad truth is morally the same people who would understand the value, who would understand the worth of the life of a very sick dog, are also the people who would understand the value of a great Muslim scholar. The same people who would think the life of a dog is not worth bothering with are exactly the type of people who would very easily look the other way as a Muslim scholar is tortured to death. Morality is indivisible. That is the nature of our moral comprehension of God's purpose and God's order. Either you believe that this universe has an owner where everything that is entitled to be where it is, or you fall into contradiction and hypocrisy and inconsistencies, and you no longer make sense to yourself, to others, or to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right before the khutbah, again, Israel launches a strike against Gaza. This is, of course, typical Israeli reporting from Israeli perspective, that they assassinated Taysir al-Jabri or al-Jabbari, a senior leader of Quds Brigade, etc. But of course, with the news, a 5-year-old girl was killed, 9 other people were killed, and 55 injured. And all those that tell you about the promise of the Abraham Accords and the wonderful coming age of coexistence have nothing to say about how cheap Muslim life has become. That the very idea of extrajudicial killings has become commonly accepted when the victim is a Muslim. I will challenge you to a thought exercise. Give me an example of an extrajudicial killing that was executed, argued, and defended in the past 10 years that did not involve a Muslim. Put differently, when it comes to Muslims, we don't even bother with evidence. We don't even bother with the pretense of human rights and human values. it has become entirely acceptable in the mind of the West, also which includes, by the way, in the mind of Russia, in the mind of China, in the mind of the Islamophobic India, when it comes to Muslims, to kill first and ask questions later. So Israel can kill 9 people, injure 55, kill a 5-year-old, and wake up the next day and continue talking about the peace process and the Abraham Accords and the wonderful new age of assimilation and cooperation between Israel and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. But here is the thing. It is we, it is Muslims themselves, by their apathy, by their lack of understanding, by their lack of motivation, by their lack of principles and commitment and investment, who have enabled this abysmal situation to exist. It would be impossible if Muslims had their act together, if Muslims understood their own tradition and their own religion, if Muslims understood the relationship that they have with their own value system, it would be impossible to treat Muslims with this level of disregard and amorality. One final point. I noticed an article about the rise of hate crimes in Canada. Hate crimes against Muslims jump in Canada 71%. The irony is how boring it has become to keep noting that Islamophobia has very real victims. The victims of Islamophobia is Salih al-Munajjid. It is precisely Islamophobia that has labeled someone like Salih al-Munajjid an Islamist and therefore disposable. It is precisely Islamophobia that has labeled someone as a terrorist. And once that terrorist label attaches, then it becomes legitimate to kill first and ask questions later. Not just kill the person, but kill the person and anyone who happens to be in the vicinity of the person at the time of the killing, as Israel has just done with the death of the 5-year-old. Islamophobia is lethal. And the victims of Islamophobia, from China to Burma, to the prisons of Saudi Arabia, to the prisons of the Emirat, to the refugees in Yemen, to the refugees in Syria, keep accumulating in the millions, year after year. And the thing that is truly stunning is the absolute lack of response on the part of Muslims. Islamophobia has become the plague of our age, a lethal menace, and yet Muslims continue debating marginalia at best. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم واسأل الله يستجب لكم. اللهم اعف عنا، اللهم اغفر لنا، اللهم ارحمنا، اللهم تب علينا يا تواب واهدنا لأقرب من هذا رشدا يا علي يا عظيم. Allah forgive our sins. Allah grant us the straight path, the right path. Grant us the understanding of creation and your lordship. Ya Ali Ya Azim, Ya Rabbal Alameen. وصلي وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأقم الصلاة.